Hey folks, this is Kelani. With the Battle of Dazaralor just around the corner, it should come as no surprise that we just received the raid release schedule, so we know when each difficulty will unlock and how many wings this raid will be split into for the looking for raid difficulty. Let's have a look at how things are shaping up, and I'm also going to give you a little bit of advice to make sure you can prepare for this next raid tier to the best of your ability. Let's jump right in. The Battle of Dazar'alor will open up on January 22nd for North American realms and on the 23rd for European realms. We'll start with just normal and heroic modes as per usual, with Mythic and Raid Finder Wing 1 opening up the following week on January 29th. 2 weeks later, we will see the addition of Raid Finder Wing 2, so that's slated for February 12th, and 2 weeks after that we'll see the third and final wing of Raid Finder open up on February 26th. That's quite a good chunk of time between those Raid Finder wings, and with there being a total of 9 bosses in this new raid tier, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's 3 bosses in each wing. I don't think they could do it any other way due to how the raid is set up. It's quite unique, but we'll get into that a little bit later. We also know that the Dazaralor trolls and Kulturan humans will become available for play sometime after the raid opens, and those kind of unlocks are usually related to quests. The story quests for Uldia weren't available until Gahun's Raid Finder Wing opened up, so I would imagine these new allied races won't be playable anytime before February 26th. Just something to think about. So now we know when each difficulty and wing will open up, let's have a talk about how the raid is set up, because there seems to be a bit of confusion regarding the different bosses, which doesn't really surprise me. The dev team decided to do this raid a little differently. The Horde and the Alliance will be fighting different bosses, but the same bosses altogether. That makes sense, right? The Alliance is attacking Dazar'alor while the Horde is trying to defend it. This isn't a simple dungeon or underground facility we're delving into. The faction conflict has fully spilled over into the raid tier, so here's how it works out. There's 3 initial bosses for each faction. These 3 fights are more or less the same thing, but they do have some minor differences. The Horde will face off against a Champion of Light first, then tackle Grong the Gorilla, and then move on to the Jadefire Masters. The Alliance, on the other hand, will take the fight to a Champion of Light first, then a pair of Jadefire Masters, and finish up the first 3 bosses by tackling an undead version of Grong the Gorilla. The actual bosses for the Champion of Light and Jadefire Master encounters will differ between factions, but the fights will be the same when it comes to abilities and mechanics. Grong is largely the same fight for both factions, but his abilities will have different names and themes, but they'll do pretty much the exact same thing. From there, things do get a little bit weird. The Alliance is one step ahead of the Horde at this point. They push through Dazar'alor's defences to take on Opulence in the Treasure Room. These vaults won't be so easy to plunder. The treasure itself comes to life. After putting down the treasure elemental, the Alliance comes upon the Conclave of the Chosen. They'll be fighting aspects of the Dazaralor, and when they manage to defeat them, they move on to their prime target, King Rastakhan himself. During that time, the Horde are trying to make it back to the top of the temple to reach Rastakhan in time. When they arrive, the Alliance are already retreating back to their ships. At this point, the Alliance story is done, so they don't have any more encounters. The Horde needs revenge for this assault though, so they chase the Alliance down to the harbour and even give chase on boat by the sounds of things. Their next encounters are against High Tinker Mechazok, who is buying time for the Alliance to reach their ships. Once this little roadblock is dealt with, the Horde will have to contend with the Stormwall blockade. 2 TIE Priests are making this very difficult, but the Horde will eventually push through, and that's when Jaina takes the stage. She leads the Horde ships out into the sea to try and turn the odds in her favour. So, each faction really only has 6 bosses each, 3 which are more or less the same and then 3 that are very different. How do you combine this entire story together to make sense from a gameplay perspective? It's actually pretty cool what the dev team decided to do. The factions will each play their starting 3 encounters, the Alliance will then work their way through their 3, which ends with Rastakhan. The Horde will reach the top of the temple to find the Alliance already on the run, and they'll ask what happened. In what is supposed to be a story kind of flashback, the Horde will then play through the Alliance bosses as Alliance characters. That includes racials and everything, so you get to find out exactly what happened by killing the bosses for yourselves. After that, the Horde plays through their 3 encounters, which ends with Jaina, and the Alliance will wonder what happened. Why is Jaina hurt? What happened after they fled the temple? Well, in the same fashion, they will see a memory or a flashback of someone who was there and managed to get away, and the Alliance will swap over to Horde characters, again racial abilities included, and work their way through the Horde side of the story. In effect, no matter which faction you're playing on, you're going to play through the same 9 bosses in more or less the same order. Jaina will be the last boss of the raid tier for everyone, even if you're an Alliance player, so when the raid actually comes out and you turn into a dwarf or a human randomly for that 4th boss, even though you're playing on the Horde side, Now you know why. I think it's a pretty creative way to tell the story, in a raid no less, for both factions while opening all of the encounters to everyone for gameplay purposes. Hopefully it works out. So that's how the raid will be laid out, but what can we do to prepare? Well, there's a few things I'm going to do personally. The first is look over the dungeon journal. Not only will this give you a visual representation of how the raid is laid out and in what order you're going to be facing the various bosses, but the journal actually includes pretty much every ounce of information you need to take down these bosses when you get to see them. You might not have a strategy set in stone, and you might just want to wait for the various guides that come out on YouTube or other fan sites because, hey, it's easier, but reading through a boss's abilities for yourself should give you a pretty good primer, and then at least when a guide tells you how to handle a certain mechanic or ability, you already know what that ability does. You can also have a look through the loot on offer to see if anything is of particular interest, transmog for weapons, the new gear sets, or even look through the Azeroth gear to see if any of your best traits are available. There's also a little bit of story for each boss, if that's what interests you. I'm going to keep an eye out for more raid testing on the PTR as well. I'm not too sure if we'll see anything, but from what I can remember, we haven't really seen that much raid testing done for Dazaralor. Hopefully the raid will open up on the PTR again so we can take another swing at it. If it does, I wouldn't be surprised to see boss guides earlier than usual, so keep your eyes peeled. I'm also going to be stockpiling various consumables. Every little helps in raids, especially for the first few weeks on the hard stuff while you're a bit behind on gear. You should have a good stock of food, either personal food or feasts, depending on what you're using. Both are readily accessible now with the new blood sausage and the new sanguinated feasts, so hopefully your guild can work together to get a good stock of food saved up ready for the next raid. You're also going to want flasks and potions if you really want to give it your all, and I reckon the holidays would have been the best time to really stock up on that kind of thing. All herbs and potions were pretty cheap, and some of them still are, but as you get closer and closer to the raid, everything is going to be more expensive. On the flip side, if you're wanting to make gold from herbing or alchemy, it might be best to wait until the raid actually releases to start selling your goods. I think the first week might be saturated enough to actually still be cheap, but that is a bit of a risky thing to rely on. I've already got my stocks of consumables ready to go, but I will be trying to make a bit of profit from selling stuff when the raid releases too. And then something which might not be the typical consumable or resource you would think of gathering, we also only have a few more weeks until this raid goes live, which means just a few weeks to get your guild rosters in a good enough shape to withstand the next raid tier. Recruitment has been pretty hard these past few months for our guild at any rate, and nothing will get players as excited as a new raid tier. Plenty of people will be returning to see what this new adventure is all about, so it's the perfect time to swell your ranks and try to keep a healthy player base going forward. Obviously, if you don't have a guild and you're wanting to join one for the next raid tier so you can have a consistent raid team and schedule, you also only have a few weeks left to get that all sorted. Finding an ideal guild can take a very long time, but the only way to find a home in Azeroth is to try out a few places and see if anything sticks. In the time between, at least you get to kill a few bosses and get some loot. If you wait until the raid is released, you'll probably end up seeing a lot more requirements to join guilds, especially related to killing bosses. These next few weeks are going to be the easiest time to join a guild. And it's also important to be in a good spot yourself. If you're leaning one way or another when it comes to class choices and what to play in this next raid, you should have a look at the different encounters we'll be facing. It looks like the majority of them will feature plenty of ads, and there's a few council fights too. Going down the list from the Horde side, we have a fight with ads, a fight with ads, a fight with 2 bosses, a solo boss fight, a fight with 4 bosses, Rastakhan has a huge number of ads, Mechatalk has a few ads but I think will mostly just be about the boss, Stormwall Blockade has a few main targets as well, and then Jaina seems to be on her own. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, and when you look at the bosses, it's pretty easy to see that it could very well be true, but a lot of chaps are thinking that multi-dotters and strong cleavers will dominate the DPS meters for this raid tier. That means Warlocks and Shadow Priests might come out on top. Anyone with Burst AoE or strong sustained cleave will probably be up there as well. I'm not saying that's the main reason I'm looking at playing a Shadow Priest right now, but it's definitely part of the puzzle. Warlocks are going to be such a safe choice though. If you're looking for a class that looks to be a top contender this raid tier, you can't go wrong with Warlock. I can't believe they've been doing as well as they have been, and they might have another multi-dotting playground to stomp all over with Dazaralor. I wonder how many Warlocks we'll see in some of these world first kills. It's going to be really interesting to watch Method stream their progress again, but multi-dotters and cleavers are going to be hype once again. And while this might not be related to the raid itself, Season 2 Battle for Azeroth will also introduce a variety of changes to the Azerite armor system. Perhaps most importantly, it will add item level 400 and 415 tokens to the Azerite armor vendor. My advice is to do the highest key you are capable of each week for the next few weeks and save all the residuum you can until after Season 2 starts. Even if you buy a 385 token for whatever reason, after Season 2 begins, that new piece of gear will have the extra ring of traits, whereas right now it won't. Save your residuum until after the raid opens. But that's all I wanted to talk about regarding the next raid and how you can prepare for it. Honestly, the main part is probably just getting past that hurdle of this raid tier is going to be a bit weird. We're swapping between Horde and Alliance and back to Horde, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. What do you think of the Battle of Dazaralor from what you've seen so far? Do you like how the bosses are laid out? Or would you rather the faction conflict not have anything to do with how raids progress because it's made everything complicated? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.